Welcome to the X Factor podcast, where if you got a... That was the stupidest thing ever.
Welcome to the X Factor podcast. It's Coach Brew. I just stole the mic from my co-host, John Rennie, because, well, I have broad shoulders and I can carry the introduction.
I had this really cool thing I was going to say, but I couldn't remember what it was once I started talking.
That worked out well.
Yeah, well, I think...
we're just moving the newspaper a little closer to the door every day for John on this pod. And the irony of this is episode numero tres, number 3, where he's actually supposed to be interviewing me.
Yeah,
I
was heading
interviewed
down
him
that...
in episode 2. If you missed it, go back and listen to it after this one, of course, because this one's more interesting and important. But
I was thinking, Coach, that we needed a catchphrase, and I was working on that in my brain, but it didn't sound good in my brain, so it didn't come out right. So
we need to maybe brainstorm catchphrases before we use them, or maybe our listeners might have a great catchphrase that relates to the X Factor they would like to share with us.
I was going to say like welcome to the X Factor podcast, where where we believe you need to be different or be invisible or something like that. That's what I was going to say, but then it didn't sound good, so I didn't say it. So I hesitated. When you got to take the shot, when you got the opportunity, you got to take a shot. You can't just hesitate like that. As a former lacrosse coach, when you got an opportunity, you take the shot, right?
That's what you call segue right there, folks. And a good one. That was good.
Yeah. Today we are going to
shoot your shot, John Rennie. You got to shoot your shot. And on that intro, you're shooting blanks.
I hesitated.
Shooting blanks.
It's not good. Never hesitate. I'm ignoring that comment. So welcome to the X Factor podcast, where today we have a special guest and a guest on his own podcast. We have Coach Brew, John Brubaker, who is a former college lacrosse coach, who is now recovering, who is now an author and business coach, and he is he's doing a lot of things to help people basically make a difference in their businesses, in their lives, in their careers. I work with him. He has a group of people he calls Yesterday's Underdogs, and that's a group of entrepreneurs and leaders that are working together, and I'm part of that group, and that's where John and I met. And
where can people find out more information about that group, John?
Probably coachbrew.com, but also yesterday'sunderdog.com, right? I'm assuming.
That was well done. That's a good recovery from the introduction.
It would have been a great introduction if I would have taken my shot, but
horseshoes and hand grenades, baby,
or nuclear weapons, missiles. Mm-hmm. We found that were pretty accurate, even. Yeah. So, Coach Brew, John Brubaker, how are you today?
If I were doing any better, I'd be John Rennie.
Yeah, and there can only be one of us, or me.
Thank God. I'm doing fabulous. It's at the time of this recording, it's a beautiful sunny Sunday in the fall. It is November in Maine, and it's 70 degrees. It's actually warmer outside than it is in my office where I'm recording. I would have a t-shirt on outside, and I'm wearing a sweatshirt inside and shorts. It's probably the last time I'll be able to do that, because we'll probably wake up to a foot of snow tomorrow.
Oh, I was going to shout out to Al Gore for bringing you some warm weather this time.
And inventing the internet so we could record this.
If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here right now.
Really?
Yeah. So, Barker, you know who Al Gore is?
I feel like I should be looking this up right now. But I definitely have heard that name before. I just can't think of exactly what he did.
The scariest part of that statement isn't that he doesn't know who Al Gore is. It's that he's college educated, just graduated.
Graduated from college. Doesn't know who Al Gore is.
Doesn't know who Al Gore is. Now, see, folks, this is the difference between receiving a degree and earning a diploma. Those two aren't the same thing. I'm starting to think the DFE just received the degree.
Yeah. What is what they say in racing when you drop out of a
Robbins
race? It's called DF. DNF did not finish.
I think that's Robbins racing.
Okay.
But DNF. If he didn't hit you, son, he rubbed you, and Robinson is racing. What movie?
I'm not sure. Is it the one Yeah, I don't know.
You
John,
need a
it's
hint?
obscure movie references.
It was not obscure. First of all, it's
Is it
NASCAR, and it was Tom Cruise.
is it Tom Cruise Days of Thunder? I wasn't sure if it was that or
You're
the
welcome.
one, the two, the Wonder Bread. What was that one where I don't know, another NASCAR funny
Will
movie.
Ferrell.
Will
Yeah.
Ferrell, yeah. Can't remember the name of that one. That's why I
Talladega
couldn't come up with the
Nights.
title.
Talladega Nights.
Talladega Nights. That's it.
Oh, I have seen that. I have seen that.
There you go.
Oh, you see, you've seen that educational program. You have no freaking clue who Al Gore is.
The 45th Vice President of the United States.
Shout out
Albert-
to Wikipedia for saving Parker's ass on that question.
Albert Arnold Gore Jr.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, amazing. So he was vice president when well, okay, we're not gonna bring up Joe Biden, are we? When Joe Biden was still just a great grandfather.
10% for the big guy. So
10% for the big
anyway,
guy.
I thought this episode is supposed to be about me, not politics. We're losing listeners mentioning Al Gore and Joe Biden as we speak.
Well,
So
but
can we get back on the rails? Because we're off the rails there.
you know, absolutely. We got to get back on the wagon here. So, John, Coach Brew, how are you today? That's what we started.
John.
You said it was wonderful. We're in New England. Where you're calling? You're talking to us from Maine, right? From the backwoods of Maine.
Scenic and picturesque Cumberland Center,
The way
which is
life,
the center of the universe, the way life should be.
the way life should be.
Vacation land. Yes.
Maine vacation land. So let's talk a little bit about you. If I were a unprepared podcast host, I would not do any research about your background, and I would just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the coaching business.
Yeah, don't you love that? Like, this is the mark of the absolute worst podcasters and the worst meeting hosts. So, John, introduce yourself,
Yeah.
right? Don't you love that? Like when you're doing a speaking gig and they say, I'm just going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Nothing builds credibility, hypes up an audience, and positions you as the foremost authority, quite like introduce yourself, which is why we do that. We don't do that out of intellectual laziness. We're actually making fun of our profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
So
I do a lot of
Talk
research.
about the Navy, John. That's another favorite of mine.
Yeah.
Like when you're
I
interviewing someone, talk
could
about.
never be in a submarine. What's that like? Okay.
Yeah.
So John, how did you get to be the Coach Brew that we know and love?
Yeah. So long story short, went to college I majored in psychology. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in psychology, which basically qualifies you to do nothing in the real world unless you get your PhD and become a psychologist. Finished my doctoral coursework, started writing my dissertation, and I got the coaching bug. Started becoming a college coach with my free time on a part-time basis, fell in love with it, realized as people on my dissertation committee were dying and retiring, and I was just getting tired of writing, ironically, that I didn't want to be a psychologist. I didn't want to sit behind a desk in an office all day and listen to other people's problems. And I decided really my real career calling would be to be coaching people in a different way. And that would be as a college lacrosse coach. I spent 12 years doing that, got fired on my birthday for not winning a national championship. And I like to say that was the day I became an entrepreneur.
So repeat that again, because I think it's really important to what you just said. You were fired for not winning a national championship?
Fired for not winning a national championship. And that's sort of how you know that small college athletics in a minor sport has become a big business when you get let go for not winning. It's no longer about education and leadership and mentoring the future leaders of tomorrow. It's just about, the bottom line results. You'd expect that at a major Division I program in a major sport like football or basketball. You don't expect it in a minor sport, certainly not small college level, but that's the reality of the industry or the business today. And it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I had no work-life balance. my daughter was born 6 months before that, like 2 weeks before the season started. And I was up in the morning and out the door before she was awake. I didn't get home at night until after she was asleep. I basically had this little human running around my office that, I didn't know who she was, 6 months or my house 6 months later. And it gave me a chance to recalibrate. It gave me a chance to find balance. And I also realized, I've got a wife and a kid and a mortgage. I need to find a way to, create my own opportunities and have some stability. So that was the day I became an entrepreneur. It's probably the best thing that happened to me looking back. The irony of it was at the time, it didn't feel like it,
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've written a few books now. Like how many books now is it total? Is it 10? I can't keep track. There's a bunch behind you right there on the shelf. By the way, I'll do a little shout out. I don't know. I'm probably going to get a fine for this, but this is a good book right here. It's called Seeds of Success, written by John Brubaker. I'm holding it up. This is actually one of my favorite leadership books, and it talks a little bit about your journey through being a coach and your mentor, and lessons you learned from them, written in a fictional standpoint. So that's a great book, by the way, Coach Brew.
It's available at seedsofsuccessbook.com.
Great book. So how many books now have you written? It's been a lot. 10, is it? Or
12. Yeah.
12.
And
okay.
beyond my latest book, which is almost done and almost available, Beyond Stadium Status, will be 13.
13 books.
Some of them are written under a pen name, but written by me nonetheless.
That's great. So number 13 coming out. It's available for pre-sale at
beyondstadiumstatus.com.
Excellent. So you are you're an author, you're a business coach, you're a speaker. So this X Factor is all about talking about people who are doing things differently. What in your mind, what does X Factor mean to you?
X Factor is the it factor. Like someone's, you refer to someone has it, this intangible quality that seemingly no one can describe or quantify, that appears to be their key to success. Well, that's what we do on this podcast, is we describe it and we quantify it, or at least make it this, this nebulous, intangible thing we make tangible. And we demonstrate what the X factor is for, each person, brand, concept, whatever it is we feature. And, at its core, I believe it is being willing to do what no one else is willing to do. Success, winning is not convenient. It's not easy. If it were, everyone would be doing it. So being willing to do things other people aren't doing when they won't do it. And, being willing to be mocked, being willing to be weird and put yourself out there in a different, not for the sake of being different, but different in an authentic way. That's the X factor.
Now
and being kind of a force of nature, which we talked about in the last episode where I interviewed John on the pod. And it's, there's a force of nature quality to everyone and everything that has the X factor.
So you tell a lot of stories in the book Stadium Status, and now you've got a new book, Beyond Stadium Status. Maybe tell a story of someone that has the X factor.
Do you have a favorite story in that book, John?
I'm trying to think of. You talk about some country music stars. Well, what about the gentleman that's got the brand that has spun off, the clothing brand that's spun off and actually become more popular? Is it Granger Smith?
Granger Smith's a great example of the X factor and a great example of doing something differently. He's a country music artist who, after a number of studio albums, released a viral video of kind of an alter ego character, a caricature of himself, which went viral and got millions of views, took on a life of itself. And it was Earl Dibbles Jr. So it's kind of fun. I actually had Granger and Earl Dibbles Jr. both endorse my book, Stadium Status. But parlaying something as different as creating an alter ego who is, just a larger than life a little more out there version of himself into a lot of commercial success and fame, was a springboard to, creating an apparel brand based on a catchphrase that Earl had, which is Yee Yee, Yeeyee. And the apparel brand wasn't simply an apparel brand. It developed basically a cult following and a rabid customer base. It became a lifestyle. And that has in some ways not just augmented, but and I don't know that it's really eclipsed his success as a musician, but I think complemented nicely would be a great way to put it. And those two things very congruently feed one another. So I think, when you see someone who has the X factor like that, who's willing to put himself out there and create something really unique and different, it's not different for the sake of just being different. Like John, if you wanted to be different as a leadership expert, who is a former officer on a nuclear submarine and now writes books and speaks and is the CEO of a company. Like if you want to be different, you just release a sex tape. No one else is doing that in your industry, right?
Good point.
But would it be congruent?
Yeah, no, not at all.
Would it be on brand?
No.
So don't just be different for the sake of being different. Practice what I call intentional congruence.
What I love about
one arm of your business feed the other, which they both do very nicely in his case.
Well, yeah, what I like about his story is that now in the middle of a pandemic where, country artists aren't touring, right? They're not selling out stadiums and they make very little money now on download and play on music. Okay. Now he has the business of the apparel line that's kind of keeping things afloat in the middle of this crisis. So, it's a good opportunity, like you said, to be different, not only to be different, but also to augment the existing business to be able to be successful, even when things go belly up. So, if you're a leader, you're an entrepreneur, you're someone who's trying to be different, also think about like how can you make yourself resilient to the kind of things that will affect your business. So if you own a restaurant, right, and they're going to shut down restaurants, what are you going to do differently, right? Is all you do you have a barbecue sauce line that you can sell, or are you like the best takeout place in your city, right? How are you going to make a difference? How are you going to keep sustaining during, what crisis might come your way? So how are you differentiating yourself?
Yeah, I think those X Factor brands, John, have a fan base. They don't have a customer base. They have a fan base. Some people joke that like Grainger doesn't have fans. He has cult followers. Like it's a cult following. People are such rabid fans. They're not just customers. They are incredibly loyal evangelists. So your example of like a restaurant during the pandemic, and if there's, phase 2 shutdown at the time of this recording, it's November of 2020, and winter is coming in much of the country and flu season, and like there could be a phase 2 shutdown. So the restaurants who simply rely on walk-in traffic and serve food will not just shut down. Many of them won't survive. But the quote restaurants that have a huge fan base, not necessarily huge, in terms of quantity, but quality, they have huge fans, will still order takeout. They will buy that special barbecue sauce or margarita mix or whatever it is to take home, and they'll tell everybody about it. They'll make their drinks at home using the restaurant's margarita mix, and they'll post video of it on social media and tag the restaurant. And like, that's what we're talking about. You're building fans. You're not just building a customer list. And having fans is a much more viable business model for times like this, because these are unprecedented times, as the media loves to say. And it's really not that unprecedented. Because there is a recession, a great recession in 2008. There's a mortgage crisis. There's ups and downs in every market, every industry, every economy. Given enough time, if you're an adult in your 40s, these aren't unprecedented times. It just happens to be the delivery vehicle for these tough economic times happens to be a pandemic. but it's the companies that are forward thinking and really build a fan base that are ones that I think have the X factor. They get it.
That's it. And it's funny when you talk about the X factor, but you're actually applying these principles as well. So the cover of your new book is an example of doing things differently, right? To stand out, but it's also congruent with your brand. So describe the cover of your next book, Beyond Stadium Status.
So what do most book covers look like? I'll put it to you that way. Like, I'll ask that question. Let's ask the DFE what most book covers look like.
What does a normal book cover look like?
Nonfiction business book.
I feel like it, to be honest, like just a regular.
Lie to me. Don't be honest, Parker. Lie to us.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's most book covers are kind of boring. Most business book covers remind me of like my college books that I would get, and there's no standout. It's just very simple, not much to it, other than usually the name, little background picture, and then the author's name.
You just described my book. Thanks. I'm just kidding. That's absolutely right. There's like some incongruent image, some stock photo of like a couple of people, sitting at a boardroom conference table or whatever. And then like in some random boring Times New Roman font, author's name at the bottom, title at the top. And it's the same color as every other book on the shelf in that genre. And that's for any genre, really. So what I decided to do is I decided to be obnoxious and in your face and sort of mock book covers. And it says, this is a book by John Brubaker. The title of the book is Beyond Stadium Status.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Cover.
It's like there's like a tan sort of parchment paper colored background. It makes it look old, not like a regular old book. And in the fill inside the letters and the font is Babus New font. In the fill inside are fans in a stadium.
And what does the back of the book say?
The back of the book
usually
says,
the back of the book, you have all your famous people saying great things about you as an author, but instead the back of your book is rather unique as well.
Yeah, the back of the book says the font on this book is Babus New, and Coach Bru's cover design budget is $0.
Yeah,
and that's literally what it was. That was
it's
the font. It was $0 to create that.
It was funny is when you first sent that book, I am a P1 fan to Coach Bru. So I get all his emails, and I was able to see an early cover, and I thought it was an early prototype cover of the book, and that there would be more details later. I didn't realize that actually is the book cover. And so I'm excited. I have it on order. I'm waiting for my pre-order to come out, and I'm sure they're coming out soon, but it's probably one of the most unique book covers I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's the willingness to be different or be invisible. So
that could be a tagline to this podcast.
And I don't think I'm perfect by any means, because shit, look, it took me 13 books to figure that out. So yeah, but it's just a willingness to do something different. One of my friends was, his name's Rick Barker. Shout out to Rick Barker if you're listening. Love you, Rick. He was Taylor Swift's first manager. He literally took her from $0 to $2 million when she was like 16 years old, I think. And he had a philosophy, and this is sort of how he helped launch her career. He said, weird wins. 98% of the world is not willing to get weird. 98% of your competition is not willing to do weird stuff. So if you're willing to get weird, you just eliminated an overwhelming majority of your competition. You're just competing against 2% of the market. So they started to do weird stuff. She didn't care if she was doing a radio tour and singing to, 3 people in the programming department at a radio station. She treated those 3 people like there were 3,000 people in an arena. She stayed after and signed autographs, even after venues closed. She would stand outside by the headlights of her. It wasn't even a tour bus at the time. It was a tour van. The headlights would light up, enough of an area that she could get some interaction with whatever fans were left waiting to see her. And Rick would take pictures on their phone for them. Most artists aren't willing to do that. Most brands aren't willing to go the extra mile and be creative and weird. And those are just 2 great examples of being a little creative and a little weird and how you differentiate and separate yourself.
And that's all about the X Factor.
Yeah.
What are your words of wisdom as we close out this episode, Coach Brew?
My words of wisdom as we close out this episode are to follow what I like to call the George Costanza principle for success.
Which is?
I want to see if the DFE has any freaking clue who George Costanza is.
I'll look him up right now.
Festivus? You're her holiday?
We're on episode 3 and we haven't fired him yet. This is amazing.
It's getting close, though.
Do you know who Seinfeld is?
Yes, I do know who Seinfeld is.
So how do you not know who George is if you know Seinfeld? Have you seen the TV show Seinfeld, or you just know who Jerry Seinfeld is?
Have you heard of Shrinkage?
No, I only know who Jerry. Like, I've only heard of Jerry Seinfeld.
All right, so George is a character in the TV show, former TV show, Seinfeld, and George is kind of a lovable loser, and never seems to do anything right. So there's this one episode where he's kind of lamenting to Jerry. He's like, every decision I've ever made in my life has been wrong. Whatever I think I should do, and I do, never works out. So Jerry talks him into the whole idea of, all right, so I agree, George, everything you do is wrong. Everything turns out to be a miserable failure. What if whatever you think you should do, that with the next decisions you make in your life, you actually do the opposite of what you think you should do. You just kind of defy your own norms and rules. So in that episode, George lands the girl of his dreams. He meets a woman and she's way out of his league and she falls in love with him. George, who lives with his parents, moves out and gets his own place. He's doing the opposite of what he thinks he should do. And he lands his dream job working for George Steinbrenner in the New York Yankees in like a major role with the team because he did the opposite of what he thought he should do. And that is the George Costanza principle for success, because so often brands, business owners, entrepreneurs, whoever, people do the same thing everyone else is doing, and they wonder why they don't get uncommon results. You're going to fall into that average kind of bell-shaped curve. You're going to fall right in the middle. And mediocrity today is a freaking epidemic because everyone's doing the same thing. If you watch college or professional sports, football specifically, copycat league, in professional football, everyone, when Bill Walsh with the San Francisco 49ers many years ago started winning Super Bowls and developed a dynasty with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. He ran what was called the West Coast offense. And every single team in the league shortly thereafter started copying his plays, copying a lot of his scheme, trying to put their own little bit of personal flair to it. But everyone ran a variation of the West Coast offense, yet nobody could beat them. You see the same thing, college football with the spread offense. Everyone runs a variation of the spread, it seems, but it's never been as good as what Urban Meyer ran at Florida and then at Ohio State. So everyone's just copying what other people are doing instead of like, no, what do I think I should do? Yeah, I'll go do the opposite. What's everyone else doing? I'll do the opposite. So those are my words of wisdom. Channel your inner George Costanza as he did on that one fateful day and do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, what you think you ought to do.
Great advice from Coach Brew as we wrap up another successful episode of the X Factor podcast.
What do we want people to do with this podcast?
So if you are listening to this podcast and you like this podcast and you're becoming a fan of this podcast, you want to subscribe, you want to like and share. So if you're watching on YouTube, you want to like that thing and you want to comment on it, you want to give a review so that we can continue to grow this podcast and we continue to be different, because we know on the X Factor podcast that different wins.
No, weird wins. Weird. But you're super weird, John. So you got that covered, man.
We got that covered.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as a guest on my own podcast. This is a real pleasure. We'll have to do it again sometime, John, real soon.
So what's coming up on our next episode, Coach Brew?
So I believe the next episode is where we get canceled.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's actually an episode where we interrogate our intern and we learn what a horrible decision we made in hiring someone who has no idea who George Costanza is, does not know movie quotes from the 80s and 90s, but is a really hard worker and understands technology. So I almost feel like we think we ought to fire him, but because he's real tech savvy, digital native, Gen Zer, it's like the passengers have the guns on this airplane.
It's true. It's true.
So you want to tune in to episode, is it 4?
4.
Episode 4, where we interview Parker, and he's a guest on the podcast that he produces.
And he's going to teach us all about social media and MyFace, and I'm excited about it.
Get your Twitter all up in that Facebook. That's it.
That's it.
Share
for this.
it, rate, review, become
Bye.
a P1 listener, and get weird like Rennie.
Get weird like Coach Brew.
See you in episode 4.
See you next time.